Okay, folks. Inconsistencies. This is part 2 of Henry Cabot Lodge Jr.'s address to the nation in 1940, September the 25th. All right. Inconsistencies. It is a record which shows that we have not been clear in our own minds. Okay, I did this. I'm going to go over it again. We first enacted a law placing an embargo on the sale of arms to all belligerents. Then the very advocates of this scheme repealed it. It is a record which extended understandable sympathies to the Allies at the same time that the extension of economic advantage to Russia proceeded apace. We seem to have had every kind of a policy except a consistent policy of preparedness for America first. Of course, some will look at the great effort now being made to arm America and will conclude that we have learned our lesson, that we are now united on our goal. But the record of the years certainly holds no grounds for the belief that these efforts are more than appropriations of funds and encouraging beginnings. Mr. William S. Knudsen of the Defense Commission, who is surely a competent witness, says we will not have equipment for 2 million men before the end of year 1943. Senator Byrd, a most accurate man, says that the Army and the Navy tell him that since May the 1st of this year, only 99 planes have been ordered by the Army and 244 by the Navy. We have words and inspection trips and publicity, but we do not see any new guns or planes or tanks. There is more talk about the ships and guns we are sending away than about those we are getting. Misleading ideas. Moreover, we are still in the grip of misleading ideas. What are some of these ideas? We are told that the United States should actively take sides in this war because otherwise the United States will be alone. That word alone is uttered with a horrifying undertone. Alone! So scared in the jungle! Yet it is not obvious that every nation is alone, that we have been alone for most of our history, and it is far better to be alone than it is to have one's fate bound up with that of a nation less fortunately situated. Dangerous hallucination. We are told that our guns and ships, if not actually our men, should take their place in the European struggle. And this statement is made on the grounds that to do so will keep the war away from the United States. This is a very dangerous hallucination. The same logic which says that our ships should be in European waters in order to keep the enemy away impels one to further contend that it would be even better to have our troops in the heart of Europe, which is at an even greater distance from our shores, and the expenditure to maintain that base and supply it, etc., etc. Anyone with military experience knows that this is a question of judgment, that they can be placed too close to your body and that they can be placed too far away. If your outposts are placed too far away, you get into needless fights which you often cannot win. If not the question of sending military equipment abroad, an entirely military question, provided, of course, that we all agree that our first duty is to the United States. The decision as to where our outposts should be placed is a military decision, and so is the decision as to what the chance is that American equipment will be used by some hostile power against Americans. I like the title of this next section. I think a lot of you will too. But remember, my video might get censored because I'm smoking a cigarette. Oh, I gotta be careful. Remember, we're operating under new guidelines now. It's even been in mainstream news. They're wanting this so squeaky clean. You'll hear a motorcycle riding a Suzuki. You won't hear that other word used for it anymore. Fomented hysteria. This is this next section. I call attention also to the tendency to create fear and hysteria. I know there are those who say that only by frightening people can we obtain preparedness. I cannot hold to such a low esteem of the intelligence of the people. I think we can be alert without being alarmed. Finally, we see a lack of frankness and a lack of candor in our official attitude toward the issue of war and peace. Policies which are universally popular are tied up with policies which are very debatable in order to pull us along. You see here that, listen, let me say that again. Policies which are universally popular are tied up with policies which are very debatable in order to pull them along. Did you get it? They signed the bad stuff on with the good, so if we want the good, we got to accept the bad too. Law keeping American ships out of the war zone, a very popular measure, was tied up with the repeal of the arms embargo. And you could not separate the two. The acquisition of naval bases, a popular measure, colonization maybe. The acquisition of a popular measure was coupled with the sending of part of our fleet to the war zone. Lack of frankness. An example of this frankness is the so-called destroyer trade. It so happens that I was the first to introduce legislation with my colleague Senator McNary for acquisition of naval bases in this hemisphere. I favored outright American ownership and not a lease and a sharing of sovereignty and consequent sharing of trouble with some other power. We now have these bases on a lease, in exchange for which we have agreed to send 50 destroyers abroad. This is the same as saying that we agree to send a part of our navy. Let us call things by their true names. The consequence of giving away part of our fleet. I ask you to consider some of the consequences of this act. First, we deplete our own admittedly inadequate one ocean navy. Yeah, we got a 2, but now it's not even a 2 ocean navy that we're deployed in. It's multiple oceans. Isn't there 7 in the reversal of where Britain was at prior to World War I? Wouldn't you say that's a good insight? All right. Consequence of giving away part of our fleet. I ask you to consider some of the consequences of this act. First, we deplete our own admittedly inadequate one ocean navy. It is said that we are not using these ships. I point out that we are not using the Army and the Navy. We hope never to use them. We have them so that we shall not have to use them. It is said that these ships were obsolete. I submit that they are not obsolete for the training of men in all the arts of seamanship, navigation, gunnery, and engineering. We do not know how many officers and men are being deprived of important training because of the loss of these destroyers. But there must be many, and in active battle service in the fleet, they are far better than no ships at all. Our need for obsolete equipment. A short time ago, as a reserve officer, I served a tour in a company of tanks. Some of these vehicles were obsolete, but men could be taught driving, repairing, tactics, gunnery, and signal communication in these tanks. And these tanks are better than no tanks at all. Moreover, our 400 tanks here are worth more than 400 tanks in the Battle of Flanders. In that battle, 400 tanks were destroyed in a day. Oh, nowadays it's hours, maybe not even so much hours anymore, huh? Well, I'm not going into there. They can be used over and over here to train separate sets of men. You can interpret that comment and gesture any way you want. I hope you do. All right. Keep our weapons for defense of America is the next section. I urge that our weapons be kept for our own defense. That is my personal plea. I submit further, however, that if weapons are to be sent abroad, it should be done in the open, after debate, with public participation by consent of Congress. If we really want to send weapons abroad, let us do it wholeheartedly and consciously, not slip sideways into the chasm. All right, I guess I'm going to close it out on that section and see you for part 3.